It is very important that all stakeholders cooperate and get together, discuss, analyze, and put solutions for the future. I think this is very important. It's always important, and we always say that the government, with the private sector, and the civil society are the golden triangle. But I think now it's even more important that we all sit together and cooperate for a better future for region. Well, let me start by, if we now look at these unprecedented times that we are passing through. Actually, the COVID-19 pandemic has weighed heavily the economic growth, and even when the geopolitical challenges started, we are looking at growth rates that have been predicted or projected by the IMF have been revised to reach 3.2% this year, and for the next year we're expecting even slower growth as projected by the IMF to reach almost around 2.9%. These rates are even higher than what other financial institutions have projected for the world economy. As you see, Fitch and other financial institutions are projecting 2.4 for the global growth and 1.7 for next year. What is even alarming is the inflation trends that we are all witnessing. This graph actually is a very important graph as it illustrates the widespread inflationary pressures that we are all witnessing. And if you look at this graph, it shows that 100% of the advanced countries and around 87% of the emerging economies have inflation rates above what their central banks have targeted. And this actually represents a drastic increase relative to previous years when inflation was under control, as you see from the graph. So there is a great pressure from inflation on the global economy. Now, what is also very alarming is the slowdown in economic growth with the high inflation rates. So the risk of stagflation is significant. As you see, I'm comparing here the stagflation that we have witnessed before. This is very similar to the 1970s stagflation. The ones that we can compare with is what we have witnessed in 1970s with this stagflation. However, it differs in several aspects. What we are witnessing as a stagflation, the slowdown in economic growth with these very high inflation rates. What is different is now dollar is much stronger than the dollar in the 1970s. The other thing is that the percentage or the increase in commodity prices is less. Now we have financial institutions that are much stronger than the financial institutions, and you remember in the 1970s we had weakened financial institutions, we had the international banking crisis in the 1970s and the 1980s, so we have now stronger financial institutions, and the central banks are acting very swiftly to curb inflation. So maybe there is a slight optimism in the stagflation that we're witnessing now compared to the stagflation that is happening in the 1970s. However, the impact of this on debt levels is extremely high. Debt levels worldwide, we're talking about more than 350% increase of debt levels. We're talking also about almost more than 200 million unemployed worldwide, a great increase in the unemployment rates. We're talking also about the geopolitical challenges. The Russian-Ukrainian war is basically, according to the latest UNDP report, and I see Mrs. Elena, the UN coordinator here, is pushing more than 75 million people in extreme poverty. That's a very alarming signal on the international level. Well, I just wanted to give you a glimpse about the global situation. So when we look into, we have this how do we see ourselves, what is Egypt doing with these very challenging and unprecedented times. Egypt started, as you all know, putting the Vision 2030. We started a reform plan that was supported by the IMF on the 2016. And basically, for the first time, the Egyptian economy is started a structural reform agenda. As you all know, Egypt has passed into different reform plans, but for the first time, the Egyptian economy started working on a structural reform agenda. And as Mr. Tariq Tawfiq was mentioning a while ago, during challenging times, it's an opportune time to look for the change, to do some work or to change the course of what we were doing before. So we started embarking on a structural reform agenda. Its main focus is to tackle the root causes of the imbalances that we have in the Egyptian economy. We used to work usually on the fiscal and the monetary side of the economy, but we never tackled the structural part and the root causes of the imbalances. That's why when you look at the Egyptian growth, you see the Egyptian growth going up, and then with any sudden challenge or sudden crisis, the growth goes down again. So it's very important that we have to work on a sustainable growth that would ensure decent jobs and ensure decent employment rates. So, as I said, the national structural, and it's a natural structural, that's a national agenda that we have worked on at the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development. Part of our agenda is to recommend economic policies. So we worked on this national structural reform program. This program was done in full coordination and through a participatory approach with the private sector. A good number of the AmCham members are a part of the public dialogue and the consultation process on this reform agenda. So basically, we looked at improving, of course, the business climate, localizing manufacturing, enhancing the competitiveness of the Egyptian exports. The program focuses, expand the weight of three sectors in the Egyptian economy, basically ICT, agriculture, and information technology, in addition to bolstering social protection schemes and enhancing and investing in human capital, also developing and enhancing the efficiency of the labor market. And I like here to pause 1 minute on the efficiency of the labor market. Egypt is one of the highest, populous countries in Africa. However, we're very privileged with a young population. So working on the efficiency of the labor market, we always used to listen to the word that, or to the term that there is a mismatch between the supply and demand of the labor market. And this is very true. So we need to work on the root cause of this, which is looking at the conventional studies. So this involves the Ministry of Higher Education, Ministry of Education and Vocational and Technical Studies. We need to work on the supply and the demand side of the equation. We needed to work on the interdisciplinary studies at the higher education. We are working on the technical and the vocational studies, increasing the number of the technical schools. However, we wanted to change the mindset of the people to accept this type of technical education. So we worked on two things. One is internationally accredit the technical schools and the technical colleges or the technical universities. And the second thing is having sector skills council for the first time in Egypt. That is being done in full collaboration with the private sector. This sector skills council are the sectors that are responsible for putting all the requirements and all the credentials for all the people working in the private sector. So this is very important because, as I said, we are very privileged with young people. We're also privileged with receiving a lot of remittances from our Egyptians abroad. So this, we have to capitalize on what we have. I know the population issue is a burden on the Egyptian economy because we're increasing by 2.5 million people every year. the past 10 years, we increased by about 25 million people for the past 10 years only. So it is a burden, but since it's going, we have, of course, a plan for the family development plan, which focuses basically on the birth control from one side, yet we invest in the characteristics of people, but we also have to capitalize on what we have. That's why we started working heavily on the technical schools, technical education, accrediting them with international accreditation, changing the mindset of the people through guaranteeing a quality education on the technical side. I think this will be a breakthrough in the labor market in Egypt. All right, despite these challenges, what were the results of the Egyptian economy? The results were that we have achieved 6.6%. Despite all the overarching and overlapping challenges, Egypt's economy grew by 6.6%. This is the highest growth rate for the past since 2008. We're coming out from 3.3%. This growth was propelled by key sectors in the economy. So this came from telecommunications, 16.5%, Suez Canal, 11.7%, manufacturing, 10% increase, a rebound in the hospitality and the tourism sector by about 45%. Construction, health, all sectors grew positively this past fiscal year, and that's a very positive indicator because the fundamentals in the growth are very important. Also, we always say that growth is important, but we need to see the impact on employment rates. Growth is necessary, but it's not enough. So the impact on unemployment is crucial, and we maintained, with all these challenges, achieving a decent unemployment rate, reaching 7.2%. What we need to do is to work more. If we look into the unemployment rates, I know the averages are a little bit misleading. I'm an economist and I know that. But what we need to work on are two important things. First, the unemployment for university graduates. That's why when I was talking about the labor market, I was saying that we need to focus and shift our graduates from the conventional studies, law, economics, commerce. These are conventional studies that maybe not all of them the market really needs. So we need more interdisciplinary and multidisciplinary studies. We need more shift on the technical and the vocational side of the education in order really to get out what the market needs. We need also to look for the female unemployment. The female unemployment, unfortunately, is 3 times the male unemployment. So I know that we maintained a decent unemployment rate, which is 7.2%, but two figures we're working on, which are the unemployment for university graduates, which is still high, and the unemployment for female, which is also 3 times the unemployment of male. The other important positive factor, which is doubling the FDI. For the first time, this is the highest FDI that Egypt reached since 2007. So the FDI, foreign direct investment, reached almost 11.7%. What is also important due to the efforts that Egypt has done in the human and the social protection is that we jumped 19 places in the global, that's not the Egyptian Human Development Report, that's the global, although the Egyptian Human Development Report is a totally independent report written by independent authors. However, that's the Global Human Development Report that have jumped 19 points this year. Very important to say that in the National Structural Reform Program, we have put in place some quantitative targets in order to assess and document the developments that happened in that. Also, exports increased in total about 53%, where also 20% non-oil exports increased and about 27% increased in engineering and electronic industries. Of course, the other important issue is that we need to decrease our multidimensional poverty. Not only the monetary poverty, the multidimensional poverty, which entails basic services, which entails employment, decent employment. That's why I was saying that a big part of the national structural reform agenda is not only economic, but part of it is enhancing our social protection. And that's why, with the support of the government and the civil society, we were able to increase first 5 million, now we reach 5 million families in the cash transfer program, Haya Karima. Of course, you're aware about the Decent Life initiative, which aims at improving the quality of life of our people in more than 4,500 villages. More than half of the Egyptian population are provided with different services, including sanitation, clean water, decent housing, job opportunities, medical, more classroom. So it's basically fiber optics, everything. We're providing all services to the villages. Also, our National Family Development Plan, which is basically its key or core, its core pillar is women economic empowerment. And of course, in addition to all the health initiative, this all, as I said, it elevates the multidimensional poverty in all rural communities, making it unprecedented in terms of its coverage, in terms of its scale of services. As I said, everything, we're offering all quality services to our people, and also in terms of its finance, the amount of money, we're talking about more than $50 billion on that are going to be spent on about 3 to 4 years. What is important to highlight is that the availability of basic services, sewage, education, health, sports, natural gas, networks in the villages of the first phase will increase. Accessibility to these services will increase from 30% to almost 90%. So by the end of this current year, 2022, we will have an improvement of 60 percentage point rate that used to take more than 5 to 7 years to achieve in the previous plans or in the previous agendas. The other thing is transitioning to a green economy and, of course, investing in human capital. We have a lot of programs that my colleagues at the Institute of Governance and Sustainable Development, we're targeting more than 43,000 trainees were trained on top with top universities and institutes, King's College, Chicago Booth, Minnesota, all these Missouri State. So we have a lot of training programs, because investing, as I said, we're privileged with our young people, so investing in our youth is very key to our agenda. The other important thing is transitioning to the green economy and preparation to the COP. As you all know, the Egyptian government is accelerating green-driven recovery and climate action to be put at the core of our agenda. We have different projects that we are working on: renewable energy, sustainable housing solutions, projects that are we doing on water desalination, on waste management. A lot of these projects are being done through private sector or with the partnership of the private sector. Also, it is important to note that the government of Egypt, Ministry of Planning, with the Ministry of Environment, we have issued for the first time sustainability criteria. Within this criteria, the investment projects in Egypt this past year reached 30% of the projects are green. This year we are targeting to reach 40% of our projects to become green, and we're targeting to reach 50% of our investment projects to become green and environmental friendly by the year 24-25. As you all know, the whole government is mobilizing efforts to prepare. The whole government is mobilizing efforts to prepare for the COP 27, and we want this to be, as you all know, to be an action COP. Of course, we're hosting this COP on behalf of the African nation. We have 10 thematic days One of them is the thematic day on the Solution Day that the Ministry of Planning is responsible for. It's specifically promoting solutions on a broad range of climate change challenges, covering a holistic approach, cross-cutting themes like sustainable transport, like sustainable cities, waste management, sustainable technology. In addition to private sector and entrepreneurship will be on the thematic days. We are also responsible for an initiative, a presidential initiative called Decent Life for Resilient Africa. Another important initiative that we are doing with Egypt's climate champion, which is the National Initiative for Green and Smart Projects in Governorates of Egypt. This involves 26 governorates in 6 fields. Its main aim is to localize the idea of climate change on all our local level, in all our governorates. It involves a lot of youth, it involves women. So we have 6 themes on this initiative. The winners will be presented in the COP to present their ideas. And I think it's very important on raising awareness and on engaging all our governorates, our people in the local level in our governorates on the issue of climate change. So as you see, it involves mega projects, medium-term projects, small local projects, startups, women and climate sustainability, in addition to the role of civil society in the climate agenda. The engaging, of course, one of the main, and as Mr. Tawfiq was mentioning, enhancing, changing the course and enhancing the role of the private sector. And as you know, the state, after the political turmoil, have embarked on a lot of investment in the infrastructure. Due to the period that we have passed through, between 2011 and 2014, the government had to embark on a lot to upgrade the level of infrastructure, the deteriorated infrastructure that we had at that time, whether in energy, electricity, whether in road networks, or in transportation. In public transportation, we don't have a decent public transportation for our people. So that was the role of the state, to pitch in a lot of public investment in order to upgrade this level of infrastructure. First, to offer a better quality for our people, and the second is to provide this infrastructure for the private sector, because it doesn't make sense, none of the private sector will come to invest in a country with no electricity, with no ports, no transportation, with deteriorated infrastructure. So this was very important. Now we are, as I mentioned in the structural reform agenda, one of its key pillars is enhancing the role of the private sector, and we worked through a consultation process through different themes. One of them is to have a state ownership policy to manage the exiting of some of the state ownership, state-owned enterprises and the government-owned enterprises. But it's also important to mention that according to the latest economic census, the private sector contribution to the economy is 72%. And its employment, they employ 20 million people, so its employment is reaching about 78% of employment. That's also the role of the private sector is, according to the latest economic census, is quite substantial. However, we need to focus more on enhancing the role of the private sector, to position the private sector within the state ownership policy. The ownership policy, a big part of the council members have participated in, discussed it, and within a few weeks it's going to be out, in order to have a more, what is important is not only the management of the state, or the exiting of the state, rather than the level playing field. I think this is the key word, level playing field between the state and the private sector. I think this is what is very important, and it's the key and the core of the document of the state ownership policy. The other thing is establishing the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Egypt. And establishing the Sovereign Wealth Fund of Egypt, as you know, this fund was established late 2018. We took about a year to finish the structure, the board of directors, managing director, the executive regulation, and we started effectively early 2020, unfortunately just right before the COVID. But although we started in an investment climate that was not very conducive, however, the fund managed to place themselves as one of the partners of first choice for the private sector. What's the main aim of the fund? The main aim of the fund is to unlock the value of the country's unutilized assets and create attractive investment opportunities in sectors and activities that were maybe not inappropriate for the private sector at that time. The fund has 5 sub-funds. One of them is the infrastructure and utilities, the tourism. The second is the real estate and antiquities. The third is on the healthcare and pharmaceutical. The fourth is on the financial sector, fintech and financial services. And the fifth, which was launched 2 weeks ago, is the pre-IPO fund. And as you know, for the infrastructure, I'll just give a glimpse on what are the sub-funds doing. For the infrastructure, the fund is heavily involved in renewables, energy projects, green hydrogen. We have signed about 15 MOUs with the Suez Canal Economic Zone. One of them will be launched during the COP27. We assume that about 3 to 5 of them will materialize during the COP. Moreover, the issue of water desalination is another major area that is taking a lot of special attention. Of course, what we aim is to localize this industry and also to transfer technology to more. We have a lot, within the tender, we have received more than 180 proposals from 26 countries. So I think there is a lot of appetite and a lot of attention on this area. Also, as you know, we have signed through the utilities sub-fund the repurposing of the Tahrir complex, which is one of the oldest administrative building in Egypt, to transform it into a world-class multi-purpose building. And of course, we will announce the bidder on the National Democratic Party land that is located on the Nile close by. Another area the fund is working on, which is repurposing and renovating the area behind the citadel, which is Bab al-Azab, to transform it into an innovation zone, which will be the first across the MENA region. And of course, what is interesting and new is the pre-IPO fund. In order to align with the state ownership policy, to align with the structural reform agenda of enhancing the role of the private sector. I think in line with all these efforts to exit specific sectors and also to push our IPO program, the Sovereign Fund have launched the pre-IPO, which given the challenges that are facing the stock markets around the world, it's not the best time for an IPO. That's why we avail private equity entry points to companies lined up for the pre-IPO program within the next few years. Minority stakes in several listed companies also were acquired by different sovereign wealth funds. In addition to that, we have direct investments in different projects. We have investments in the education center. And as I said, the fund has a part of its assets are unutilized pieces of land. So we worked with the private sector in order to establish schools, either technical schools or schools that are targeting basically the middle class section. Also, one of the direct investment is localizing some of the industries, and I think one of the very good models is the consortium that we have done on the NEREC project, the National Egyptian Railway Industry Company. This company is the partnership with the Suez Canal Economic Zone, in addition to a consortium of 4 of the big private sector companies that work on manufacturing cars and railways. I think this will be the biggest and one of the very important industries that we are working on in this next year. We hope to have the first Egyptian railway cars by January 2024. We are starting with a technology partner, Korean technology partner. One of the very important things is that when you localize industry, we need to transfer technology. So we worked with a technology partner in order to localize and have enhanced the Egyptian component. We are targeting for the first batch to have 30% Egyptian component, and with the economies of scale in the next following 3 years, we will reach 50% of localized component. I don't want to take a lot of your time. These are pictures of the Tahrir complex of the, inshallah, the first Egyptian railway to be established in Egypt, and look forward to your fruitful discussion. Thank you very much.